so happy this week to be joined by esteemed tennis commentator Nick Lester, who joins me in the midst of Roland Garros qualifying. Pretty exciting time of the season, Nick. We have our second Grand Slam of the calendar year upon us.
Yeah, I think great to be here. First of all, thanks for having me, Ben. I think personally, the clay court season is probably my favorite time of year. Just in terms of the dynamics of the way points are played out. Obviously, as we know, it's a bit more physical. I think players can be more creative. They have to be more creative. And I think that lends itself to just a more enjoyable brand of tennis. It's obviously only my opinion. And some people find it obviously, can be a little of a grind, which it can be, clay court tennis. But I love the physical aspect. I love the challenges clay court tennis brings. And for me, it's my favorite 8 weeks of the year. It's a short and sweet period. The events are big. And I can't wait for Roland Garros because, obviously with what happened in Rome, particularly on the men's side, I think it's teed up very nicely for the second major of the year.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly said. And ironically, when I spoke to you last, I think I had a Wimbledon on the grass court season, completely different surface in terms of style and the way points are played. It's kind of the opposite, and I love that different dynamic. You mentioned Rome, and I think that's a good place to start. Obviously, Carlos Alcaraz feels like our clay court favorite, and he's had a fantastic clay court season. We had the 3 months off without seeing the world number one Jannik Sinner. And well, Carlos Alcaraz won this tournament and delivered a statement, beating Jannik in that finals in straight sets. I was mesmerized as well at times by the level Sinner is still playing at, even if it's not his preferred surface. What did you make of his return and how dominant he's already looking again?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you say, I think there was definitely a bit of a question mark coming in as to how he was going to look. I think more so, listen, 3 months out, he had obviously been hitting a lot of balls. Let's be honest about it, particularly over the last month. So it wasn't like he was coming back from an injury where there was that element of sort of not knowing how the body was going to hold up. I think obviously he's been able to hit, particularly over the last month. I think the big thing from the team, from what I can understand, was they weren't quite sure how he was going to hold up in match play because, again, from everything I understand, from what Darren Cahill was talked about, practice was fine, but playing matches over the last 6 weeks, practice sets, was tricky because he was a bit in and out at times in those situations. Obviously, you can't replicate a match on the practice court, and I think they had to work hard from what I hear, just to get Sinner engaged in sort of practice points, because until you're actually out on there's something that actually meaningful tournament wise, they weren't quite sure where he was at. So I think it was an incredible level, particularly the match against Rude. Obviously we get a lot of tennis insights numbers these days that are thrown at us, and I think collectively that was, as you may have seen, I think maybe the second or the best performance all round from any player in the last 2 years in one single match that night against Casper Ruud. So we're talking about obviously one of the best clay court players probably of this generation in Casper. I know he hasn't won the French, but he's won pretty much a lot of big titles. And the way Sinner dismantled him, it's probably not a bad matchup, but was very impressive. And then maybe I think the way the final played out, yes, it was great from Alcaraz, but I think Sinner got everything out of that match he probably wanted as well. Yes, he didn't win. He had a couple of set points. He kept it close. Physically, he faded a little bit, obviously, in the second set. But I think you could tell from the way Sinner reacted at the finish that he got what he wanted out of Rome, primarily. He didn't come away with a title, but he came away with a bulk of matches, and I think he will be good to go in pretty much where he needs to be, close to it anyway, for the French.
I was reading this statistic, and this is since the beginning of 2024, Jannik Sinner's record against the tour 85-3, and then 0-4 against Carlos Alcaraz. And I think back, obviously, you've been covering this sport for a long time, and I'm sure you well remember the early dominance of Roger Federer. And some of these numbers are a little bit reminiscent to when Roger was mostly dominating the circuit as a world number one back in 04, 05, 06. And there was really only one player who could beat him, which was Rafael Nadal. Are you sensing a similar type of situation now on the circuit with Sinner as the world number one?
I think probably on clay, I think you would probably have to give Carlos the edge personally. And I think Sinner said that himself, right? I think he moves marginally better on clay. I think he has more tools on clay than Sinner does, definitely, to utilize, to go back what we talked about at the start of the conversation. He can exploit, he has the ability to change up with the use of the drop shot. He has the ability to hit the kick serve. He can keep you off balance. He defends a little better than Sinner. Again, we're talking tiny margins, but I think on clay, you would probably have to give Alcaraz the edge. I think on hard, again, for me, Sinner probably, again, we'll look forward to seeing them play on hard, I'm sure, in the summer, but I think it's a much more even matchup on the hard. Personally, I know in Beijing, Alcaraz won that match, but again, we're talking about a point here or there, right? It was final set breaker, so wasn't a whole lot in it. So do we talk about a matchup where Alcaraz is favorite more often than not? I'm not so sure yet. I think Sinner probably, as I say, I think at Roland Garros, for me, Sinner's Alcaraz is a clear favorite. But I think the one thing that's evident as well in the matchup is that Carlos is more focused, it seems to me, against Sinner, because he has to be. He has periods in matches in Monte Carlo, in Rome. He has periods in matches where he, and I'm sure he would be the first to admit this, his level fluctuates quite drastically. And whether that's a concentration thing or whether that's because he just is so much better than these guys. He experiments. He likes to experiment, but you don't get that against Sinner. He doesn't do that against Sinner. He seems to me when he plays Jannik, he is engaged. He is tactically much more aware and astute. And I just feel like it's a more polished, might be the wrong word, but I feel like it's a more just a focused Alcaraz. That there is that match on Sunday. When you look back at it, there was very little in the way I think you could pick out from Alcaraz that maybe you could do in previous rounds where you sort of say, well, that shot was a bit questionable or this, but against Sinner, he knows he has to be 100% dialed in every single ball. And I think we saw that again in the final in Rome.
Yeah, completely agree with you. It's kind of a different, maybe it's sort of a transition period for the tour. Obviously, we've left the Big Three era. Novak Djokovic is still playing, but you look at the results of the past 5 majors, and it has been split by Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz. Now we're seeing different results, obviously, at the Masters 1000 level, and some new players break through there. How far right now do you feel that Alcaraz and Sinner are ahead of the rest of the tour? Is it 1 or 2 steps, or is there a decently sizable gap right now?
I think watching Sunday, I think there's still a decent golf. I honestly do. I think obviously Jack Draper's made huge progress. Jakub Menšik is someone I think that has an enormous room for growth still and a huge weapon in his serve. Menšik is someone I think that can continue to develop. Still very young, of course. Jack is a phenomenal competitor, and sort of getting to know a little bit more about Jack, obviously being from Great Britain and being around his team a little bit more. Jack is someone that will have the utmost belief in his own ability. And I think, sometimes we don't necessarily, when we look at it from the outside, we see players and we just look at the nuts and bolts of their game. But, I think what we don't always know is what a player sees when they look in the mirror. And I think certainly just speaking from Jack's perspective, I know having spoken to his coach a couple of times, Jack is a unequivocal believer in his own ability. He sees himself as winning the best prizes in this sport. And I think that's a huge part of this sport, right? If you don't see yourself as that person, and there's been a lot of good players over the years, I think, but maybe they haven't quite had that extra edge of belief in themselves. Jack is in that category. I think you look at the young guys. I was talking to Jamie Delgado about this the other day, Grigor Dimitrov's coach, and he was saying to me that people like Menšik, they are so courageous. They are fearless. These guys play fearless tennis. And I think that's the one thing you see from the slightly younger generation and the 18, 19, 20-year-olds coming up. They don't fear. Menšik goes into the final in Miami and beats the greatest player of all time in 2 tiebreaks, or I think it was, to win
Yep.
Miami. That's an incredible effort. And that's an incredible, I think, tells you so much about the belief. Yes, of course, the game. You have to have the game first and foremost, but it tells you about how he perceives himself. What does he believe he's capable of? And I think, you do see that with the younger guys coming through. They don't fear. They don't fear that as much as perhaps some have in the past. And I think that will set them in good stead going forwards. But I think to answer your question directly, at the moment, I still think there's a reasonable gap between those top two in terms of the level they can produce. Their highest level for me is still somewhere above the rest at the moment.
You're bang on. I feel like some of these young guns, thinking of Mensik in the Miami final in two tiebreaks against Novak, you're expecting him to flinch once or twice or blink once or twice, and it never happened. I don't know if you saw this viral moment of Alexander Bublik mentioning to the chair umpire Molayani, remember when tennis was easy, and he was playing Mensik on the other side. But I felt like that was sort of speaking to the level of depth and progression and athleticism that we're seeing the rise on the tour right now. Are you sensing that just over the past 4 or 5 years? It like my belief is maybe it's not necessarily the top 10 that is suddenly stronger. It's the trickle down from 20 to 100 that seems just maybe 20 to 200 that just seems very, very high.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. I think, to be honest, you could make a case, and I think a fairly strong case, the top 10 is weaker than it was 10 years ago. Again, I don't think that's the world's biggest statement. You obviously look at what the top four were obviously exceptional, so you can probably take them out of the equation. But obviously we had Nishikori, Del Potro, Burdick, Ferrer. We had these guys who were on the periphery of winning majors and in many ways were blocked from winning majors by the big four. So I think the top 10, the depth of the top 10 is, personally speaking, not what it was 10 years ago. But I totally agree that 10 to 100, 150 is as strong as it's ever been. And I think you can look at, I'll give you a quick number. This is an interesting number. So someone told me the other day that I think it's 39% of matches at Masters 1000 level this year have gone to a third set. It's the most ever in any single year that's been the case. So again, you can read a lot into certain stats, but I think that tells you that the field are packed. There is a lot of tight matches out there. And obviously Masters are now pretty much 96 draws. So that takes you down to players rate 80, 90. So the competitiveness in the tour right now probably, I think, is as tight as it's ever been. You look at how many matches are won from match point down. I was given that the other day. I think there were 25 already this year. So it's tight. It's tight, and it's becoming more and more competitive. And I think you wonder, how rarely do you get a blowout these days? When do you see a match? Yes, I know we had a couple in Monte Carlo where de Minaur beat Dimitrov pretty comfortably, but very rare now do you get a match 2-2 or 1-1. It's almost unheard of in the men's game at the moment, from my perspective. And again, I think that comes back to what you talk about. That wasn't the case 20, 25 years ago. There were blowouts. Now, very rarely. It's an extremely competitive environment at the moment.
You talked about Jack Draper, definitely an athlete I want to discuss a little bit more. And look, 2024 was a very good season for him as well, especially the second half of the year. He was playing some great tennis, had a run, obviously, at the U.S. Open. I don't know that I projected him to jump this far in 2025 and also to just prove himself as a multi-surface threat, someone who's now able to win big matches on clay, on grass and on hard. What do you think has there been a particular change, do you think, in, discussing with his team or just watching up close that's allowed him to make this specifically, where we obviously see him winning Indian Wells, playing in the finals of Madrid, and probably solidifying himself as one of the top 5 to 6 guys heading into the second major of the season?
Yeah, I think Jack is, I've got friends that have worked with Jack personally and seen him up close and personal. And the first thing they tell me is Jack's work ethic is second to none. I mean, this is a guy who puts in as many hours as possible to the greatest degree. And again, going back to what I said earlier on, backs himself. He believes in himself fully. I think if you look back to last year, there were injuries. He had injuries. He had some issues off the court. I think he has matured so much, Jack, personally. And I think, grown in terms of belief in himself as to what he could do. The US Open was huge last year for him. And I think surface-wise, Jack obviously on clay has the ability to hit the forehand heavy. And he can hit the forehand heavy. He can move you around with that shot. That's a ball that can, especially on a warm day on clay, as we saw in Madrid, he will move the ball around. He can get you off balance. He's got a very flat back end. There's that, often we talk about it, but he has that big differential off both sides, off the forehand and the backhand. He can hit the ball flat off the backhand through the court, take it early, and he can use the spin on the forehand to get players off balance. So he's got a great combination. He's got a great serve. Let's not, he's worked very hard on that. I know they went to see a biomechanical coach, I think, last year to change the serve a little bit. So he's getting a lot more out of that now. And again, I just think Jack is someone who really believes he belongs at the very, very top of the sport. And it'll be fascinating to see, I think, in the summer, how he deals with the attention here during the grass, because as you know, Wimbledon for the Brits is a whole different animal. He's going to be top 5 in the world coming into Wimbledon. He's going to be a lot of attention on him. Grass, where does grass fit in Jack's sort of comfortable surfaces? I think we'll find out. But I think, he's got a lot to gain over the next few weeks. Lost first round of the French last year. Wayne Ferreira was involved then. He then left the team in the summer. I think there was just a few too many voices, from what I can understand, with Wayne involved. So yeah, I think he's just got a great balance right now. Got a great coach. James Trotman's a guy who's been in the sport in certainly in my country for many years, played to a good level, understands Jack extremely well, which, as we know, is a big part of coaching. And he's got someone that will do everything they can to be the best they can be.
Thank you guys so much for watching us at Matchpoint Canada. If you like our work, follow along, hit the subscribe button below.